This is Sid Okaiba, and thanks for listening to It's Recording Time Media, the most pathetic show you could listen to. You really should be listening to something I do, like KaibaCorp.com.
The show and the comics and the books, eh? Hey, what? Yeah. Well then, will you first join me in welcoming our first writer? She has worked on a variety of programs, including live action appearances in Our House and Major Dad. She was on Alf. Who even remembers Alf? Yeah. Straight. But she became one of the first female writer for the Flash comics. She writes for Ponyville Mysteries under the pseudonym Penumbra Quill. And she was a co-creator of Transformers Rescue Bots. Please welcome Nicole Dubuque. Next up is a man who I've had the pleasure of talking to here at BABSCon before. I've also had the pleasure of talking with Nicole. But this man led an extraordinary journey. He started out as, he worked to the point of Vice President of Development for Hasbro Studios until he took a trip to Burning Man and realized that he wanted to rekindle his connection with writing, and so he transitioned. Since then, he has co-written My Little Pony the movie, Heartwarming Tale, worked on Stranger Than Fan Fiction, which title is a lie, nothing's stranger than fan fiction. He's written To Where and Back Again, School Days, and the Best Gift Ever special. Please welcome Mike Vogel. Our next guest has also had a career in acting. He was an actor in Impossible Horror, The Assistants, in Garbage, Everwood, Forget Me Not, Siren, and even Gilmore Girls. Since then, he's worked to become the story editor, which is animation speak for the showrunner. Since season 6, he's worked with Castlemania, Cutie Remark, The Crystalline, To Where and Back Again, Shadow Play, The Road to Friendship, and the second part of School Raise. Also, he is the writer of Equestria Girls, The Friendship Games. Please welcome Josh Haber.
You lost, boy?
And last but certainly not least, we have a man whose career is so long I would probably run out the panel just trying to describe all he's worked on. But basically, he has written The Heartwarming Club and Surf and Our Turf, which was nominated for the 2018 Humanitas Prize. He's also worked on franchises like Winnie the Pooh. Has anyone ever heard of Winnie the Pooh? Oh my God, come on. Has anyone heard of Winnie the Pooh?
Do you remember that theme song from the old Winnie the Pooh show? Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear. Yeah, we do. Who knows the next part? Who knows the next part? In fact, looking for fun, chasing some honeybees. Right.
And he's had a lifetime career working on various projects with big studios. So please welcome Brian Hofeld.
Big studios.
Big.
You've never seen such big studios.
It's so big. Also with the Writers Guild of America. Are the rest of you with the Writers Guild by chance? Yes.
I'm with the Animation Guild.
The Animation Guild.
Yeah. So cartoons for life, y'all.
Have you ever engaged in guild wars?
Midnight is young.
A challenge. A challenge. I like the sound of that. Well, before we dive in, we're going to have just a few quick questions on my end to get things going. But really, we'll have a microphone here for people who want to ask questions of our panelists. But before we get into that, I think it's always good to start with a little gift giving.
Best gift ever.
Best gift ever, that's right.
I didn't bring anything.
I didn't bring any killer snow rabbits, I apologize. But I did bring things that I thought would honor your careers in writing, such as, Nicole, you've written comics and books for the Ponyville Mystery Series, and even commented that as you were writing them, you were surprised at how they turned out, like how it really ended. And so to look deep into a story, to look deep into a character's motives, you need a magnifying glass.
That would be so helpful.
I was hoping to find a Sherlock Holmes style, but you'd be amazed what you can find.
No pipe?
No pipe? Well, no, this is a family convention, sir. No smoking.
It doesn't need anything in it.
Looks good on you.
Could be bubbles. Yeah.
Now, Mike, I got to hear your wonderful story about going to Burning Man, having an experience, realizing a connection with your craft that you wanted to rekindle. Basically, you wanted to feel sort of, dare I say, a charge in writing. Which is why it's always fun to have a pen that will electrocute the user.
Oh my God. I'm afraid to open it.
Your brother's in so much trouble now.
I can't believe this. This is amazing.
From now on, you can only write with
Only right with that.
only write it.
That's right, you're only around. Oh,
Not
this is a good-
recommended for children under 14 or adults over 60. I'm assuming because you'll die.
Also for external use only.
Toasty Writers is later.
Family crowd.
Oh, this would be a very shocking development. Oh. Okay, actually, I need to ask this since I'm talking to a panel of writers. Are puns really the lowest form of comedy?
No, they're the highest.
Okay, you heard it. You all heard it. I have a room full of witnesses. Someone tell Josh Scorcher. All right, Josh. Oh, another Josh. I seem to drive Josh's nuts. I don't know. You've written some remarkable stories from My Little Pony. We've thoroughly enjoyed watching them. But there's always a question. We're in the 9th season. We're going forward. We don't know what's going to come next. Just this pen might help guide your way, and you ask yourself, what would a unicorn do?
Oh my God! And it tells you.
Yes.
There's a little spinny thing with answers.
Let me see that.
So, what would a unicorn do? Pose on a windy cliff.
It's a My Little Pony story
Believe
generator.
in miracles. Frolic majestically.
Guys.
Where was this pen like 4 years ago?
In this episode, in Canterlot, Luna will chase a rainbow, while Spike will pose on a windy cliff.
I remember that episode.
Didn't that kind of happen today with the
A
episode?
little bit, a little bit.
And Brian, you who've led a long, distinguished career of writing, like I said, working with all these
I know, it's gonna be, I have a feeling this is going to be Geritol is what I'm going to be.
co-developing Rescue Bots with Nicole with the longest running Transformers series,
Yes.
which as a child of the 80s, I resent you too so much. But for someone of such diverse background, long-run career, you need a writing utensil that's just as diverse and adaptive. Therefore, I present unto you the ultimate geek pen. It has a laser pointer, flashlight, mood lighting, and
This is right up my alley.
somewhere along the way they worked out a pen in there.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. This is very nice. Geek pen.
There you go. The only condition.
yeah,
Oh,
you need this in front of us.
okay, yes. Refueling, 621 rule.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Can we have a round of applause for the convention staff who are doing this? And to the audiovisual folks in the back who make sure you can hear us. Yes. All right, but let's not dilly-dally. Oh, yes. I'll ask questions really slow so he has time to choose. So, Nicole.
I'm just gonna straight up talk with my mouth full. It's fine.
Oh, excellent. Well, like I mentioned earlier, when you were talking about Ponyville Mysteries, you said in an interview that the outcome sometimes surprises you. That moments where both you and Mike, found that a little detail early on changed the story later. Can you talk a little bit more about that process?
Sure thing, yeah. We were outlining on our stories before we went forward and actually wrote the little novelizations, but sometimes we'd just kind of say, and then this happens, and didn't fill in how that happened or what was going to happen there. And then when you're in there typing the words, sometimes the characters will just like nudge you and say like, hey, remember that thing that you set up then? Let's do that now.
And I think also, I think when they approached us about doing it, they said, hey, do you just want to write a series of mystery books about the Cutie Mark Crusaders? I'm like, sure, that sounds great. But I think their intention was that we were going to write, it was going to be like Scooby-Doo. Here's a book about the Cutie Mark Crusaders and the scary man in the haunted house. And here's one where, it's a werewolf in the woods. And then we were like, well, that's cool, but can we actually do, a 6-book arc? And they were like, sure. And so then we pitched them this thing that sounded really good, except we didn't really have anything figured out. So it's as we were going, we would write a book and we'd be like, oh, well, what's gonna happen next? Well, I don't. And then like we finally like by the third book sort of had it more figured out for the last three, but you still don't have, when you're writing these mystery books, you don't have every detail figured out. You're like, oh, I know who the bad guy's gonna be, I know what we're gonna do, but then, well, how are they gonna defeat this person? What's it gonna be? And like,
Good luck, future Nicole.
Oh, that's future Nicole's problem. But actually, that sounds like a term I've heard is that it's pants writing, is in writing by the seat of. And
I think that's all writing, but yeah.
that's all.
Pretty much.
Is there consensus on that? Pants writing all the way?
No, you're an outliner.
I'm just loving this pen. Buttons. Watch this. Watch this.
Just don't mix up the flashlight and the laser pointer. Oh, there it is.
Wow.
We are like cats now.
I'm sorry. I'll pay attention now.
But yeah, no, I do think that is true. I think that you always go in with an idea. I mean, you know, on a television schedule, you always sort of like you pitch a premise to the executives, and then you write like sort of a fleshed out outline that should cover it. But I think a lot of times when you're trying to get an outline on time, you do a lot of like TBD writing. Like you'll be like, so Twilight's gonna have this problem, and in the third act, she's going to figure out that she was wrong and solve the problem in a TBD yet awesome way.
An exciting comedy set piece.
And it's kind of enough for the executives to go, sounds great, go write it. And then like when you get to actually writing the script, you're like, TBD and awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you panic.
But it's interesting you make the Scooby-Doo analogy because people just sort of expect run around, get chased. You've mentioned talking about writing books as opposed to episodes. You get to really go inside the characters' heads. Is there another benefit to writing fiction on paper or screen rather than an episode? Like more introspection, perhaps?
Like I can say, I think that, because I had never written in like chapter format and prose format before, and so when I wrote the first chapter, because we would trade off chapters. Like that's like one of the ways that we did it, because we were also really busy writing scripts and writing a lot of season 8 at the time. So we would sort of write out the outline together, and then we would like, okay, I'm gonna write these chapters, and I'm gonna hand it off to you, and you write these chapters. So I sat down to write the first chapter of the Ponyville Mysteries, and I wrote it, and I was like, this is really bad. Like this is really bad. And I couldn't figure out what was so bad about it. I'm like, well, like the dialogue is okay, but like why is it bad? And I finally realized like, when you write a book, like take like Harry Potter, for example, like an entire page will be like, Harry wondered what was going on. He remembered that time that he was back on Privet Drive and Dursley did and Dudley did this. And like he used a whole inner monologue. And when you're writing a script, you don't write an inner monologue. You just like literally there's the dialogue and there's like scene descriptions of what's happening because everything has to happen for the viewer to watch it. But when you're writing a book, you're literally writing an entire thing. So I went back and rewrote the first chapter and I was like, yeah, Apple Bloom was mad about this, and she felt this way, and she hated when that, you know, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, this actually feels like a book. So it really is getting to really get to dive into what a character is thinking underneath, rather than just what the audience is going to see on screen.
Has that affected the other way? Like going back to screenwriting, have you been like, oh wait, I can't. No one's going to know what the person's thinking here.
I know, because I am so more like. Well, if you're Pinkie Pie, it's just the same thing. Like, you write Pinkie Pie, and you're like, and I was thinking this, and then I remember this time, and it was amazing, and it's all good, and you're like, okay, well, I can just write all that. That's good. But other than that, yeah.
And that's why sidekicks were invented, so that the character has someone to talk to. I'm going through this now in the new show we're writing for The Rocketeer, where all of our villains have some sort of sidekick except one. And it's like, how can I have this guy express his thinking when he's by himself? Because we've run out of ideas. It's kind of like, okay, we already put eyes on the volleyball kind of thing, you know. And so yeah, it's hard. That's hard.
Yeah.
It has to come out in action rather than words. And,
Do you think that's why a lot of villains like to monologue? They just want someone to understand them.
Totally,
Somebody's got to get that
definitely,
exposition out.
definitely. I had a director tell me once that things actors love to do most in a screenplay is have a confessional scene where they literally go to confession and express their sins, and because it's a monologue, it's basically a monologue, and actors love to do monologues. And the other thing was having them speak a foreign language because it makes them look smart and liberal.
Oui.
Si.
Je parle français.
Je m'appelle.
Oui.
But talking about going through the mysteries, and reading this and said, that looks terrible. That sounds like editing. And Josh, that brings us to something I recall you've said before. You said that a writer creates their own stories, but a story editor writes everyone else's.
Ooh, that was really good. You said that? That's good.
Like me at all.
Could you describe that process while we steal your food?
Wait, what did I say again? Because it sounded
It's very poignant. So a writer creates their own stories, but a story editor writes everyone else's.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Except
He said that, huh? He said that.
it sounds like me. It sounds like me, but you didn't like. There was like a level of bitterness that was not conveyed off the page. Well, I think mainly probably what I don't think I was saying that. I think I was saying that from like a nuts and bolts standpoint, where it's like when you are writing your own story, that's the only story you have to worry about. So you just start at the beginning, go to the end, and you're like, I'm done. But when you're the story editor, you have to keep every story in mind. And so, you know, when they say like writing is rewriting, like the story editor is like the embodiment of that, like, that thing, because you're constantly rewriting you're doing a rewrite of every episode that comes in to varying degrees, because there is a overarching story for a season. There is a tone for a show. There's themes and like, not every writer, when they're doing their own story, has that sort of bigger picture, that broad picture in mind. So, and they don't necessarily need to, because they only have to execute on this one thing. But as the story editor, you have to sort of keep the big picture constantly in your brain and tune every episode to that. So
he said two.
It's actually why, because you know, I think most of us like serialized storytelling. We like bigger stories with big mythology. Yes. In general.
I love my world building.
Right? Me too. But that is actually the super hard part of being a story editor, because the way that most animated shows work is you do have all these freelance writers. You know, you don't always have the opportunity to have a writer's room, so you don't have everybody working together. So you have lots of different people working on these shows, which is what makes doing those big serialized stories hard. So like when you're a fan and you're watching the show and all of a sudden you're like, well, this character said this episode, but didn't they already say this before? And like those little things, it's like the story editor, you basically have to agonize over going through all the scripts and making sure that all that stuff lines up, which is challenging, but rewarding when it works.
But also sometimes there's these opportunities where you're like, I know we want to do this thing in the finale or whatever, and like, we really haven't found a place for it, and this script is actually missing some stuff, and like, oh, we can plan it right here in this episode that wasn't part of the plan at all, but I can drop it in and it's gonna like pay off in the finale and everyone's gonna think I'm a genius.
Excellent. So you plant the seeds early, which gives me a chance to make my continuity jokes. I appreciate that. You guys know what I love to shout that stuff on lunch. Continuity. But well, we talked a lot about spoken roles, but there's also the musical aspect, which both Brian and Nicole, when you worked on, co-created Rescue Bots, there was an episode I heard the robot singing, which was pretty much a musical episode in Transformers.
Yeah, it was the second and third acts were all sung through. The first act set up why they had to. The hardest part, it took us 3 years to figure out how do we do a story where they have to sing. And because we had all this tech gone wrong as a concept of our show, we invented some kind of, like the news van, the dish on the news van somehow went haywire.
It auto-tuned everybody.
That's right, it got crossed with an auto-tuner, and it forced everybody to sing. And it was a lot of fun. It was so much harder than I thought it was going to be. I ended up writing like twice as much music and lyrics as we needed, and a lot of it got cut. But it was great because our cast. It was kind of inspired because most of our cast were professional singers. Some weren't.
Yeah, we begged Hasbro to let us do the long version of that, remember?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, like
we
a
did not win
44-minute
that
version. Someday I'm going to put together.
Mr. Monopoly was like, we can't afford it.
Someday I'm going to put together the complete stuff that was cut too and put it out there. But yeah, and we've both contributed to Pony too, song-wise, and which has been great fun for me because I love writing lyrics.
Was there a similar process when writing Surf and Our Turf, where they sing about living on the land or the sea? Because you mentioned you knew the staff for Rescue Bots were all talented singers, some of them from Broadway, I think.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
did you
Lacey.
know the voice actresses for the Crusaders and their vocal talent?
Only because I asked, would they be able to carry a song, and I was told yes, they could. So to go for it. Yeah, but it felt like a good way to dramatize that situation of the conflict, Terramar's inner conflict, expressed with them singing a song about it. Originally, with the idea I had when I wrote the first set of the lyrics, sometimes when you write lyrics, you kind of think of an existing song or melody or something to write to, so you have a meter, so you have a structure. And of Sweetie Belle, she's the one who loves Mount Eris, right?
You got it.
Yes, I can't. I'm sorry. I just kept picturing her like twirling on the hill, like Julie Andrews at the beginning of Sound of Music. So the lyrics to "Torn Between Two Places" actually fit. The first part fits the Sound of Music, which I could sing for you, but I probably.
We tried to get Julie Andrews, but she was busy.
Yeah. But then Daniel doesn't know I'm thinking that, which is great. He shouldn't know I'm thinking that, so that he can bring his own thing to it. But it sort of gave me a good starting point. And then it became like a tomato kind of song. I wish we could have done more with, like, expanded it, but I think it worked pretty well. I was looking at the script again today. Oh, which, by the way, autographed copy of Surf and Our Turf by all four of us is on at the auction. So, so get there early, put in your bids. But it ends the act. It ends the second act, which is like, that's great. And to go out on a musical number at the end of an act is great.
Well, I got one more question for all of you. Go down the line or chime in as you please. But while we're doing that, I appreciate it if folks would like to ask questions could line up in front of the audience mic. We'd like to give priority to younger members of our audience. That doesn't mean you can't get up. It just means if they're in line, we'd like to move them to the front. But you talk about the editing process, the story editor keeping the general view, the big picture in mind. Just as an example, you worked on Skylanders Academy as well.
Yeah.
And in both My Little Pony and Skylanders, I noticed that there's a lot of humor involving references to our world. In My Little Pony, in a crowd shot, you'll see the twins from The Shining in the background.
That's a bit that I put in every show ever.
And I saw it and I screamed like I was on helium. But in Skylanders, they also had a lot of references to, say, SED talks or a lot of cell phone apps. And I noticed there's similar humor but different tones in each show and how they present it. Do you find that when you're writing a story, do you create sort of is there a process for designing the humor around a specific show as opposed to the humor in another show?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I mean, and you talk about like Pony, almost any kind of meta humor or pop culture references that happen in Pony is always going to be, it's either going to be something that Pinkie Pie would say as like a toss-off kind of thing, like a weird non sequitur that everyone's like, wait, what? Or it's a visual reference. It's a gag and almost all of those are not in the script. Almost all of those are Jim Miller and the storyboard artists coming up with amazing things and plussing our meager offerings and turning it into this fabulous thing. Because the reason why I say it's either a Pinkie Pie moment, because she's sort of our fourth wall breaker. She's the one who can sort of go out of world and do a comment like that. She's kind of the only character who can. And
or
then
Discord.
Oh yeah, obviously Discord. But like those two kind of characters, or it's this kind of visual gag where it's none of the characters in the world will acknowledge it or reference it, because Pony is this consistent kind of world, right? And Skylanders Academy, the tone of the show is very different. And like Skylanders, the Skylands are a same sort of contained universe, right? But the tone of that show is slightly older. It's not quite so important that like the continuity of the world be adhered to the way it is in Pony. It doesn't have the sort of same level of like mythology, I think, that Pony does. So yeah, it really is about the tone of the show that determines how you can sort of access those kind of jokes. Anyway.
But I think in general, it's like it's something that happened in animation like around the time like when Disney sort of reinvigorated themselves with Little Mermaid and leading into Pixar movies, is that even if you're in a contained world that's separate from our world, like there was all of a sudden, like I remember when I saw Little Mermaid in 1989, you know, like Sebastian the Crab is like, teenagers, you give them an inch, they swim all over you. You know, like there's all these like references that kind of were of the world, and I think there was that moment where it was like, oh, adults like animation too. Let's put stuff there for them. So even if you have a contained world like Pony or whatever, you know, all of a sudden you got Aladdin with the genie doing his references, and then all the Pixar movies with all of these like in-jokes and references to things, and like, even I remember in an early episode of Rescue Bots when they thought aliens were attacking, in a preschool show about Transformers, we were making references to like Predator and all this stuff. Like, so I think there is this thing, it's like, we're all adult geeks who grew up loving this stuff, and now we get to make these things, and so you always want to make a show that's like appropriate for the age group that you're doing it, but anytime that you can put a fun gag or a reference, like I got super excited when we did that episode in I believe season 4 where Rarity kind of went crazy with that magical book, and she was like redesigning everything, and she kind of got addicted to the magic. And I was like, if we don't get a Jesse Spano, I'm so excited, I'm so scared reference in here, then we are not doing our job. And we did.
Excellent. All right, well, I've monopolized enough of time and attention. It's time for the audience to ask some questions. Here,
Woo!
Adjust the mic.
Friendship is magic, but I think the real magic, no wires.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What is this sorcery?
Oh my God.
What demonry is this?
So obviously you guys have had a big writing world. So I was just wondering, like, what was your favorite like scene to write in books, episodes, or movies? Doesn't really matter.
Favorite scene?
Wow, you stumped us.
You
Look at
really-
the first person and stumped us.
Maybe focus on Pony for right
Oh, I'm focused
Yeah.
on Pony.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
No,
mean, yeah,
like,
that's,
I'm thinking
that's
about
still,
Pony.
You know, I feel like sometimes, like, you know, when you go look at your bookshelf and you're like, oh, I love that book, I love that book, I love that book. That's so, like, what's really fresh in my mind right now is because we just watched the 200th episode, and I just remember laughing a lot while writing that, and so
Yeah.
right now I think that is currently my favorite. Ask me tomorrow, it might be different.
My favorite scene that I wrote in Pony, I can't tell you because it's coming up. But like I will say on Twitter when this happens, I'll be like, this is why this was my favorite scene to write, because it's something that gets discussed a lot amongst the fans, and I think we did it in a cool way, and I'm just not going to say any more than that. But I think beyond that, and I mean, this isn't a favorite scene necessarily, but I think when we wrote to Where and Back Again, like just that whole episode, we were actually talking about this morning, because I bought a piece of art in there from that episode, and the whole like getting to write all the villains like Starlight Glimmer and Discord and Thorax and Trixie, and getting to write Chrysalis, like, and doing all this stuff with the changelings, like everything in that episode was so much fun to write, and it was like all of these cool ideas that we would geek out about in the writer's room, we all of a sudden found a way to do a story where we just got to unleash all of it. It was like, there's a good changeling, and Chrysalis is getting a revenge, and Discord is super mad because Fluttershy's in danger, and like we had all of these, Starlight and Trixie are best friends, like we got to put all of it in one episode, and that was super fun.
Actually, yeah, that's like the Trixie Starlight like pairing is one of my favorites, and I think like this sort of Hope Crosby episode that we did was so much fun. Like the road trip with the two of them and that song singing together, like.
Also, and this is something that happens sometimes when you're writing with somebody, I also remember this about that episode, is that we had this moment where each of like our heroes, reformed villain heroes, was getting like taken away, and we had Discord was all that was left, but he didn't have his magic, and I was like, we got to figure out a really cool way for Discord to like distract the changelings, but he doesn't have magic. And Josh was like, what if he does stand-up? And I was like, Josh, get serious. That is the dumbest idea. Like, it's not even gonna work. And he was like, let me write it. And then he wrote it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
I had a really good time writing Hearth Swarming Eve, but mostly because I'm a sucker for Christmas. And also, it was just the Young Six are such, for me, great fun to write for. And it was nice. I just like the conviviality of that episode. The original idea was Breakfast Club, basically, and just to have them hanging out and talking about their cultures and everything. I don't know. It was just I really liked it.
I like Hearth Swarming Eve stories too.
Yeah. Oh yes, you did. You did well.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a moral you've written in an episode that you kind of needed to hear yourself, or like a book or something that you kind of needed, like, to yourself? You kind of like.
Like about like I wrote an episode that was really like feeling like it was about us.
Yeah.
All of them.
It is true. I mean, we do put a lot of, when we're discussing ideas, like, because basically most episodes of Pony start with, well, what's a friendship problem? Like, what's the thing that happens? And like, you get a bunch of people in a room, especially a bunch of like sensitive, creative people who have levels of anxiety, and you get a lot of like, you know what my friend did the other day and it really hurt my feelings? And you start to like work out your own issues. I think for me it was probably Every Little Thing She Does, where Starlight Glimmer like fell back on her bad habits and made some errors in judgment that the fandom has not let her live down. But like that really started with me kind of like looking at her as a character and thinking about my own life, and like we all go through growth in our lives where we have bad habits, someone points them out to us, we change, we try and get better, but when you feel a lot of pressure and you get a lot of anxiety, it's very easy to fall back on something and then you're like, ugh. And so for me, that was where that whole idea for that episode came from, which was super personal.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the stories that we are able to put stuff in there that's so personal to us succeed on a level that's like maybe not palpable, but I think it's just like that little extra because it's so important to you, I would have to say.
There. And the answer is.
Josh was asking, he's like, can I say this? And I was like, I don't think that's
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, there's an episode that's coming that that was, I mean, not super personal, but it was just like, I don't want to say it's super personal because everyone will be like, whoa, what's up with Abra when that episode comes out? But it's not, I mean, it's just like, but it was sort of meaningful.
This was your answer to that question. There's an episode that hasn't happened yet, and the thing that happened, it was pretty intense, and you're gonna really, it's crazy, but I don't know because I can't tell you.
Yeah. And when you see it, everyone's gonna be like, oh.
Curse you, NBA!
Oh, I was thinking of what Josh said, and as a freelancer coming on any show, as Josh was saying earlier, you know, there are variations of how much rewriting he does for freelancers. It's hard to find freelancers, speaking now as a story editor and producer, to get the tone of the show right is really what's hard. But to have characters to work with is so great to come on this show where these characters are so well defined and they just have this history to draw from. In some ways, you're limited by their personalities because they only do, you know, because they have such strong personalities. But in another way, you can tell so many stories with the personalities the way they are. So then what you do is you bring what you can bring to it through those character voices. And I think that makes the difference really between writing that kind of stands out and writing that doesn't, is how much personality every writer, everybody's going to write that story different. Everybody's going to write that script different. So we're always bringing our own experiences into it, even if it's a defined set of characters.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anything you either edited out or was edited out from your stories that you wish had been left in?
100%. Every episode, we were writing long for a while. In fact, I think we cut about 10 pages from the 200th episode. And we try to save things that if it was like a really good joke or character moment, we try to save it and put it somewhere else. Like you were saying, like, oh, finally one that's short, let's stick that in there. But yeah, lots of stuff gets cut. And sometimes it's just like a legal note, a standards and practices note kills a joke, which makes you sad, or any of those things.
And I will, like, if there's a moment that I like, or a joke that I like, I will fight forever at the expense. I'll be like, well, cut some of the story and just do this joke, because, like, it's worth it. This joke is much,
if anybody would ever like to ask me about the entire backstory of the Storm King and all the stuff that got cut in the Pony movie about him, I would love to tell you about it, because I was really mad about that. There was all of this stuff about like why he wanted that staff and how he had been like the runt of his like race of people, and like all of his like race of people had like been on all fours, but he was the first one that stood up. Like there was a whole thing that really got into like the original opening of the movie was Tempest, like finding these people that had the staff and him coming in, and it was this Darth Vader entrance, and he was in a lot more of the movie than he ended up in. But when you're like making a movie and you're trying to get it to time and you're trying to make sure 6 of your main pony characters are getting featured, stuff kept getting cut. But like that's definitely something that, like, you know, when I watch that movie, there's definitely stuff with that where I'm like, oh gosh, if only that stuff had made it in.
And then he fell to pieces.
Broke to pieces at
We
the end.
cut like 20 pages out of Best Gift Ever, too.
Oh yeah, Best Gift Ever was long. There was so much more stuff, and like it kept being like, you need to cut this down. It's like that was, yeah. I'm like, I'm gonna make this easy on myself. I'm gonna tell 6 separate stories and weave them all together.
Anyway.
But at least
hello,
Discord knows that Snake Eyes made it in.
That's right.
Hello, Josh Amber. I hear you like Rainbow Dish. Yep. Rainbow Dish. So anyway, my question is, what would you guys do for the final season if you could move the narrative 10 years in the future?
Wait, 10 Earth years or 10 equestrian years?
It's kind of the same, isn't it? Isn't the moon a month?
No, it's totally different.
10 years in the future. What could we do?
Josh, what could we do?
Discord's pregnant.
Gallus and Sandbar are married.
Yeah, I don't know. There are a lot of things we could do.
Well, in that situation,
You're right now. Right now, what's going through Josh's head is like, what do we actually do in the rest of this season, and what can I say and not say?
Yeah, because I don't have a great memory, so you can ask me a question and I'll start saying this thing that sounds like a really great idea and then realize that that's a story I've already written.
I will say, you know, without getting into spoilery stuff, like I do think that a cool part about knowing that season 9 was the final season is it did allow everybody to kind of go, okay, well, what are the stories that we really want to make sure we want to get in? And what are the things that we want to sort of like, whether we can actually put it in there or hint at or give a nod to, so that when audiences do finally watch those last few episodes, they kind of get a sense of what the future is like for the characters that survive.
Before or after the snap?
Well done.
Hi, I have a question for Mike. First of all, I'd like to thank you and your team's work for the holiday special, Best Gift Ever, for giving us something to enjoy while waiting for season 9. During the first song, One More Day, there was a scene where we see Pinkie Pie's sister, Marble Pie, being heartbroken over seeing Big Mac and Sugar Bell together. So my question is that scene still just a one-shot joke, or is it something that'll be addressed and followed up in season 9?
I'm sorry. We, as a rule, we can't ask about what hasn't happened yet because, like you guys say, there's an NDA. So, is there humor in suffering? I guess is the question.
Well, yeah. So I can't, like I said, I can't say whether that references anything as it come. But what I can say is that when I watched we were talking about this the other day, like even this morning with the 200th episode, like even when you write a script, like DHX does such a great job of adding so many cool references. Like in Best Gift Ever, I didn't write any of those awesome background cameos of like Buddy the Elf Pony or like Bird Lady Pony from Home Alone 2. So part of the fun of when you've written something is when you get to see it for the first time, you're like, oh, that's cool, that's great. And I was watching this for the first time and I'm like, I love this song that I wrote. That was really what just happened to her. So you'll actually have to ask DHX that sometime because I was just as surprised as you were. And I felt really bad about it. It's like one of those things like in real life where like you feel responsible, like you see somebody get in a fight in a restaurant and like some guy breaks up with some girl and then she's crying and you're just sitting there eating your cheeseburger and you're like, maybe if I had done could I have done more? Like could I have done something to prevent this? Like I'm just eating my cheeseburger here. That's how I felt.
Sorry about that question. I didn't know.
You know what? I think that was an entertaining answer, right? Yeah. So great question.
Again, thank you for your work on Best Gift Ever.
everybody.
Hello.
I think I've met you all before, but I'm not quite sure.
Where was that?
Oh, that's right. I just want to start off by saying thank you guys so much for everything you've done for My Little Pony and for giving us such incredible stories that we'll treasure for generations to come. But I did have a question for Josh, and it's coming after Moltdown. Did you take anything out of Mitch Larson's book on how to put wings on Spike?
I just put a bird on it, whatever it is. Just put some wings on it. Yeah. I mean, it's a hysterical, like, to draw that connection, like, for me to just sort of take the wing mantle. But, I mean, honestly, we were just thinking, you know, it's time for Spike to, you know, it's like, it's been 8 seasons, like, we have to do some growing up. There has to be something that happens, and what's a way of representing that? And we've already seen Spike sort of grow to be like a giant monster dragon, and we were going to do something like that, and we wanted something that was going to be lasting and impactful, and what's going to be a really transformative thing that is representative of that. And I mean, just Wings was like the natural sort of thing. So it's fun that it is like the funny sort of thing about you know, what happened in the fandom when Twilight got her wings, and to sort of like revisit that. But it was also just like a necessary evolution of the character. It just felt right. So, but I also love that it's funny. So.
And one last question I had was, for all four of you, did you ever have an episode that you were writing that you say that you could do this, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh, geez, this is difficult for me to write?
So like every episode.
Every single idea I've ever had.
Just wanted to make sure. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
When's Spike gonna get a horn now, though?
Alicorn Spike.
So way back in like season 1, season 2, season 3, the fandom was writing fan fiction, and one thing that kept popping up across a lot of it was, after 8 legendary seasons of MLP Friendship is Magic, and well, now here we are years later, and the final season is happening, and it's exceeded 8, because we're in the 9th one. Was that any influence at all, or like, was it planned to try to go 8 seasons at least originally? Because that was a joke back then. I guess people didn't know if it was going to last.
I love that you say that, because you know, when you work for Hasbro, you're not really allowed to really dive into the fan fiction just for lots of legal reasons. Of like, you know, you just have to make sure that there's like a big wall there. But I kind of love this idea that like some Hasbro executive was reading some fan fiction and was like, 8 magical seasons. Hey, that is not bad. That's like, I just like that version of events.
Get Mr. Monopoly on the phone.
I see a couple of movies in there too.
Right? I think that we were talking about this the other day. Like, when you're working on an animated show, like if you get 2 seasons, you're like, I'm living the high life, man. I got to tell some stories. You never expect to work on a show and go, well, that was fun 10 years later. You just
Never.
It never happens.
Never.
But
you want every show to go forever. Like.
And I think that everybody, you know, all of us are just like super nerds who get to do this for a living. So like anybody, we sit around, when you start working on a show in season 1, whatever, you sit around with your friends, especially at the end of the day, you've done your work, and you start talking about what you'd like to do in season 3 and 4, and if you got to go this far, wouldn't it be cool to do this, that, and the other thing? Like, you have all those ideas. 90% of the time, you just never get to execute, and this is just one where everyone's just gotten a chance to really, like, put their mark on certain characters or certain things, and it's been great.
Yeah, I think when I came on the show, we didn't know if 8 was going to be the last one or not. So a lot of what we were writing in 8, we were still like, who knows? And so knowing that we were wrapping it up in 9 was actually a huge gift for us to be able to, like, you know,
really was
focus and hone.
The not knowing is horrifying, because you're like, so maybe season 8's the end. So we want you to write a story that kind of wraps everything up, but maybe also doesn't. So let's do that.
Right, and this will happen on Rescue Bots too. We thought season 3 was the end. It's going to be the end. That's it. So we wrote this. You know, we put all of our emotion into this, and we ended it so well. And they're like, "Guess what? You're greenlit for 4." Like, now what? So.
I think it's funny because on the one hand, there is this sense that, oh boy, wouldn't it be great to have all these seasons to write all these stories? But like day to day, it's like, how are we going to come up with another story? You know, it's like
It's like, how many friendship stories are
exactly,
there?
exactly, yeah. So it is. So there's kind of that push-pull. It's like, yes, we got season 2. Oh no, we have to write more episodes.
And then you get people who are like, didn't Twilight already learn this lesson? It's like, yes, she did, but we have another season of episodes.
I got nothing left, man.
And like, have you always perfectly executed a lesson that you've learned? Like, oh, I saw that. I never have to speed again because
But to be fair, I think that one of the things that's really interesting about Pony is that I think that partially because you never think you're going to get this, is that when Pony first started, when Lauren came up with this idea and Hasbro launched the show, it was a bit more designed as like a standalone. Like each episode was a standalone. There was a very loose mythology that we sort of referenced, but here was a Pinkie Pie friendship story. Here was an Applejack friendship story. And by the time we got into season 4, the show sort of like, usually when you know a show is going to be serialized, you're like, here's what's going to happen. The Fire Nation took over and Aang is going to have to do this. We've got a story and we're going to tell it, and you tell that story and you have an end in mind. And My Little Pony, that wasn't like that. So it's a show that sort of transitioned from being a very sweet and adorable pastel-colored SpongeBob SquarePants with heart into epic story of 9 seasons. Yeah, like so it's like there was a lot of like we sort of shifted gears somewhere in there, which was
I think
interesting.
the nice thing is that happened organically. It wasn't like you came in with the Bible in season 1 and said, "This is the complete world. Nothing else is going to change. We got to do this." Whereas because it was so loosely, you know, there was a mythology sort of, which I think is what made it popular.
I'm trying to do it on every show going forward because I don't have a world building brain, but I like sort of like the loose idea. So like start with a loose idea and like funny stuff, and then in success maybe I'll be able to do the pony thing again.
Meanwhile, I draw fantasy maps of my worlds every time I start a show, so.
To clarify, when you say there's a wall between fan fiction, you're not like having signed something that says you're not allowed to read.
No, I mean Hasbro actually built a wall, and we have to live behind it. That's its actual.
They got Mattel to pay.
They're like, build that wall, build that wall. No, I just mean that like you are, because there's always it's a Hasbro legal thing. They're like, look, you can't go and like just dive into fan fiction because like on the off chance that you're writing late at night and you accidentally take something, and like we don't want to steal from anybody. Like, you guys do such amazing work and you're so passionate. We would never want there to be a situation where it got like dicey between the fans and the creative team. That's me speaking as my former Hasbro executive self.
Yeah, so we're just not allowed to look at it on the off chance that a similar story is thought of. Hasbro can always just say, well, it's definitely not that because they're not allowed to look at that stuff. So.
What about now after this season? Are you allowed to?
Oh, I'm gonna binge it all. I'm gonna read it all, y'all.
Yeah.
I got one for you right here.
Oh, howdy, everybody.
Hi.
Hey. Before I get on with my question, I need to address the elephant in the room. Who's taking home the party cannons?
I legit was like, I walked in this morning and I was like, I'm gonna fit that in my bag. I'm gonna take it home.
It's nice, you kind of feel at home.
I'm flying back United Basic Economy, so I'm not even allowed to carry
Josh
on.
is flying back after the Toasty Writers panel tonight, so I think he's gonna be the one that's gonna be drunk enough to try and take that thing on the plane.
All right, now for my actual question.
It's a hat. Excuse me, sir. What's that in your pocket?
Okay, well, over the entire series of Friendship is Magic, some of the best episodes have been those that focused on not just one, but two of the main six because of the way the characters interact and play off of each other. My question for all of you would be, if you had the opportunity to write one more episode, but it had to focus on one of the main six and one of the student six in combination, who do you think you would choose to write a story for?
Stupid six?
No, student six.
Oh, student six. I was sitting here and I was like, student six?
That's the spin-off, okay?
All right, so one main six and one student six?
Right.
Ooh.
Rarity and Smolder.
Ooh, that's good, okay.
Oh yeah, because she likes to dress up.
Not secret.
It'd be interesting to see Yona and Rainbow Dash together, just because they're so physically different and.
And Rainbow could save her from falling.
Yona's kind of built like a tank.
Tank, I get it.
Hey, she's strong. She's tough. I like her.
I want to see what I can do with Silverstream and Applejack. That's like totally different, so I want to do that.
I want to do like sort of some like crazy adventure with Fluttershy and Ocellus.
Oh, I would love that.
Like I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's something where like, oh, maybe it's like there's some weird animal and Ocellus has to like be that animal so to help. I don't know, something Ocellus Fluttershy.
He never stops thinking of stories. It's amazing.
Okay.
I'm logging this all to my
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
My question, let me get close to the mic. So, sorry about that. So, my question is, do you find, I've heard rumors that Celestia and Luna are hard to write. Do you find them hard to write? And if not, who do you find hard to write of the secondary characters?
That's a good question.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this last night.
There are certain people early on Pony, I know because I was there, that felt like Celestia and Luna were hard to write. And I think that what's been great about these later seasons is, I mean, today is a perfect example, is like, once you just stop being afraid of these godlike power, like I think they're not fun to write when you feel like you have to keep them super serious.
Yeah.
And as soon as you make them funny, they are so funny. Like Luna throwing shade this morning was my favorite thing in my life.
Tony's episode is so great.
It's great, right? But I think the thing is, like, I know that there was concerns early on. Like, when I was an executive and I was working with Brian Leonard and the executive team, we would sometimes throw out, we're like, hey, what if we did, like, a Celestia story? And a lot of times what we would get back is like, well, you can't do a Celestia story, she's boring. And I think that once you kind of, like, opened up to being like, no, she's not boring because she's crazy. And like once you get into like sister rivalry and like the stuff that's there, and I think it's a good lesson for like any character is like if you feel like a character is boring or challenging to write, remember that characters have like human beings have tons of facets and come up with some other aspect of their personality that might be unexplored, and then it's more fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you let them be characters as opposed to just be like one note.
Yeah. Who's hard to write though? Like a secondary.
I mean, honestly, like starting out, the hardest character to write for me was Twilight. Like Twilight was always the hardest because
she's a main character.
No, I'm just saying. Like,
I know.
Like that was always because as the sort of leader, like one who has sort of the most exposition, that was the hardest one.
To refer back to the previous question too about pairing up characters, I think you could pair up any two of those characters and you can come up with a great story because they are so. The young six, you just did a fantastic job with just. They seem like they existed forever, which is a hard thing to do when you're introducing 6 new characters. So it just complemented the other characters so well. And my hat is off to you.
Who's hard? Who's hard, Nicole?
I'm thinking on that. I mean, for sheer rhyme ability, there's Sakura, but
Oh,
it's just
man.
because you have to agonize.
Sakura's like a nightmare, y'all.
Of
course.
It is so hard.
I love writing for Sakura because I like it's the same reason I like writing lyrics. Like I like coming up with these rhyming couplets, and I'm like frustrated when there's a Sakura script that comes in and like it doesn't scan the right way. Like she does a rhyme and like the next word rhymes, but it's like there's too many syllables in the second phrase. Like what are you doing?
She's freestyle.
Boulder's pretty hard to write for.
toughest. But I do think I can't think of specific. But what I was saying before is like when I'm writing a character and I find them hard to write, I literally will make up a character trait or a personality thing that's like that hasn't been explored yet. So you never like contradict anything that's come before. It's not like I'd be like, I feel like Rarity hates dresses. But you look.
What if Celestia was secretly a hoarder?
Yeah. See, that's the thing is you're like, God, what are we gonna do? Celestia is a hoarder. She has like this magic artifact room, and she can't let anything go. And Luna's like, girl, get rid of this stuff. She's like, but this mirror is so pretty, and like that's
joy.
an episode.
This mirror brings me joy.
Mike, these are my things. They are mine.
Hello!
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I just love Discord. Anyways, how you guys doing?
Good.
Great.
Okay, I got one question for you guys, but I also got a back one in case this one doesn't plan well. So my first question is, Are you guys open to any new ideas for another Equestria Girls movie? If not, then I can always go back to my.
I'll go back to the other question because Hasbro won't let us do it. So I bet it's amazing though.
Okay. Okay, picture this. 7 new students are transferring to Canterlot High.
All right, tell us later though. But what is your other question?
Okay. How did you guys get into your love of writing?
I always liked telling stories. I think it took me a really long time because I didn't go to college to become a writer or anything like that, but I think it took me a while to be like, oh, of course, right? It all made sense when I started actually working in animation because I would sit and just tell stories with all of my animals for hours at a time in the middle of the night. And I was like, oh, okay, it all makes sense now.
Yeah, similar. We were talking about this before about the question that was on Twitter a lot about what happened in your youth that was on brand for you now as an adult. And I did the same thing, only instead of stuffed animals, I had the magnetic letters that you put up on the fridge and with the board, and I would imbue each of those letters with a character, with personality, so that B was the hero of everything, and he could fly and everything, and I would the different letters would be characters, and I think I started, and I always enjoyed watching people, just sort of observing human experience. And I think it starts with character, and telling the stories that you see around you, I think, is sort of what impelled me.
I hate writing.
If you could do anything else, you do.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't like writing at all.
But you like having written?
Yeah, I like having written, and like I was an actor for a while, and like that's just fun, because there's like writing is work, and acting is like playtime, and so I had to figure out a way to take the play that you do as an actor, which is like goofy, trying stuff, and bring that to writing. And once I did that, I was just sort of like, oh, all right, this is all right. This isn't so bad. It's like getting to act all of the parts. It's that.
I think it's like one of the things that I think that just is in general a life thing that I've learned or that I believe is like, just like Nicole and Brian were saying, is like when we were kids, we did this. Like we played with our toys, we made up stories, we did it. And I think when you get older, at some point in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, wherever it happens, like people start telling you that thing that you thought you wanted to do when you were really young, you can't do for like a host of reasons. Like you're not going to be able to get paid to do it. It's really hard to break in. It's all about who you know. Like there's a whole host of reasons that people will give you why you can't do the thing that you loved as a kid. And I think when you're lucky enough to just ignore all of that and just continue to do what you wanted to do when you were like 6 or 7 years old, it's awesome. And I think that's what we're all lucky enough to get to do, is that we just ignored everybody who said we couldn't do it and just barreled forward until we got to do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is this good? Okay, I didn't want to, okay. I was wondering, I don't know if this can be answered, but I was wondering, did Hasbro did they say why they wanted My Little Pony Friendship is Magic to end? Out of curiosity?
I can't think they know.
I don't know for sure, and no one said anything, but I think that knowing just the history of the toy business, I think like, for example, I'll give you a different example, like Transformers the movie back in the 80s, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic.
Anybody a fan of that gem?
Yeah.
Still hurts.
I know, a lot of characters got
Remember
killed.
when they killed all the Autobots? And
Yeah,
had a
that
whole
was
new
sad.
cast of Autobots and Decepticons come in and
Why you
Megatron
gotta
became
put me down
Galvatron?
like this?
That was because they had already sold a bunch of Megatrons and Optimus Primes and they wanted to sell different things. And I think whenever a toy company wants to stop doing something, whether it's successful or not, and go do something different, most likely it's because they probably want to sell new things.
Not surprised.
It's not like this stuff is not selling. Why sell new stuff?
I guess you guys just aren't buying enough ponies.
I find that hard to believe, but okay.
You guys buy all of it.
So there wasn't an email from Mr. Monopoly saying do not pass go on this?
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
They're gonna do Hungry Hungry Hippos. Friendship is hungry. That's why, guys.
Friendship
That's the
is
real
dinner.
reason.
Well, it's very honor to meet you, and you guys inspired me to do a story version of something that has happened. I'm a freeformer myself. I've did a lot of cool things, and I've got these little business, like, sort of cards. There are 2 for each of you, one to hold on to. The extra one is in case if it's...
I'm sorry, really don't want to make a pitch at me asking a question.
Sure.
See if I'm getting this correct.
There's 2 for each of them, in case they lose one.
Thank you.
So, I know it's kind of sad that the series is ending, but here's one question. If, given just a year, or maybe one more, if fans wanted it back, would it be a surprising comeback to do season 10 and beyond for a big surprise to everybody to blow their minds?
I mean, it would be a surprise to us. We haven't been hired yet.
It would be a surprise.
Here's what I think. I think, look, My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic is a show that, like, when My Little Pony came out in the 80s and went away, nobody ever thought it was going to come back, and it came back stronger and better than ever in this version that you guys have all fallen in love with. And I have absolutely no doubts that at some point in the future, even if, just like with Transformers or other things where they go in different directions, they try new things, I have a feeling that, like, it will be impossible to fully abandon this version, these characters, this universe, this mythology, and I would be shocked if in a few years it didn't come back in some way, shape, or form. I don't know anything, so I can totally say this. This is not like spoiler info or anything. That's just what I believe, knowing how awesome you guys are as a fandom and how popular the show is. I can't imagine that this is the end, and who knows what form it'll take in the future. It'll maybe be like a live-action CG movie with Ryan Reynolds as the voice of Spike. He's a detective. He's got to solve the case. What happened to the elements of harmony? Will Smith will play Discord. Everybody will be really upset about it in the trailer. It'll be amazing, guys.
And you never know. I mean, look at Young Justice. There's such an outcry from fans that it brought it back after 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So if you want a season 11, let them know. Or at least
season 11, season 10. I'll take 10.
Or go get a job at Hasbro, and then work your way through the ranks until you're in charge, and then you can make a comeback.
Well, thank you guys, and I just gotta say that this I'm working on is a brand new tale, hold the pun, and for the Young Six, I gave them a better name, the Species Six, because they're different species. Makes sense, right? Everyone?
Remember that movie Species with that woman who it was the alien that ate people?
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
How's that for a Species Six?
Short series. Each everyone goes over.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Great, thanks.
Hey, so writing being an iterative process, how do you guys decide sort of like the order of episodes and what characters are going to be featured in each episode? Is that sort of like a executive decision, or do your pitches just get passed and they're like, all right, you can do this episode? And if you guys had a chance, like, what character do you guys wish that you could have written more of?
I mean, first of all, I can address that when we were working together, Josh and I would go up to DHX, or the team from DHX would come down from Vancouver to meet with us, and we'd kind of do 3 story breaks. Was it about 3, would you say? 2 or 3? Okay. Per season, and just kind of set out on the whiteboard, like, what pairs of characters have we done, who haven't we done? Who do we need to focus more on that maybe we shortchanged in the last season? Just to kind of just start out that way, and then start pitching stories for those characters, or where we wanted to go with them. And so then it would be, we would narrow down the ones we thought maybe were most fleshed out for the episodes we do first, and start submitting those as premises. So sometimes things got kicked down to the end, and sometimes they never got developed. So, like, Cake Doctors was the name of an episode that never happened. Like, but
I want to know more.
Yes, definitely Picky was in it. So that's kind of how that goes. Do you want to? Who do you wish you could have written more for? I mean, I want to write for all of them. I freaking love them.
More Maud and more Zephyr Breeze.
More my brother would be very. Zephyr Breeze is based on my brother. True story. And especially after watching him today, like, my brother literally has a picture of him next to Zephyr Breeze, and he shows it to women. He's like, hey, I'm a pony. Because he's literally Zephyr Breeze. So.
The Zephyrist.
Oh, we got a swooner.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So my question is, how does the writing process for like finales and premieres change from like writing regular episodes in a season?
It's a lot harder.
Stressful.
Way more stressful.
We have a lot more meetings together. When we were working together, we did that a lot. Like we would just do an 8, for instance, the premiere of 8.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time in the room, just really going over those beats, making them make sense.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, the way that Pony is built, you know, like the two-part premiere and the two-part finale each season really is where you deal with the bulk of your mythology, and then the other episodes throughout, you'll do little bits of it here and there, but like they're more standalone, and so they're just really, really big episodes. There's a lot you want to fit in. You want to make them epic. We have a history of really awesome episodes, so you want to make sure you're like working to that level, and then you do all that, and then DHX is like, that is too much. We cannot do all that in the animation, and then you have to figure that out.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we get notes and it's like, well, that's not the story we want to tell. We're like, we just broke that story and it's really good. Like, nope, new direction. So.
But yeah, to Mike's point, it's like the premiere and the finales are really, that's our serialized bit. Like those are the season arcs, and you know, like you said, there's going to be 5 episodes that are a part, you know, within the season that are a part of that arc, that serialized thing. But they're sort of like here's the problem of the season, and we're going to open this box in the premiere, and here's the resolution of that thing, and we're going to close the box. So it is a very different process to do the finales.
And I'll say that, like, so that all being said, when you got to the finale for season 9,
it's a much bigger box.
It's like usually you're like, well, I'm going to close this box on this season, and then what are we going to do in this next box? And you're like, so we're going to close this box, then we're going to close the box, man. Put it up in the attic. Take it down once a year and look at it. Remember the good times.
There's really like 9 boxes at that point too, because it's like everything.
So yeah, Russian dolls.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. My question is, how is the complexity and the audience expectations managed for a show like My Little Pony? Because it's like a multimedia franchise. There's a lot of products. There's separate books. There's comic books, and then there's like I know in the fandom there's a MLP wiki where details are listed and compounded and stuff. And then for the audience, I've noticed like in the movie, for example, you see jokes for like Storm King that seem aimed maybe at parents, and then also over time there's been definitely like a adult audience that's emerged for My Little Pony. Has that affected it and also like over the seasons, characters develop, details develop, and you have to keep those in mind when you develop new episodes. So do they get more and more complex, or is it like how does that work?
All I can say is thank God for the fan wiki. Like, we spent so much time in the later episodes going like, what happened to this person? I don't know, let's look it up. And then you look it up in the fan wiki, you're like, oh, okay, cool. So like keeping track of that, the level of complexity and all the details, we really leaned on the fans for that.
Having been on both sides of it, having been on the executive side for many seasons, like what really does happen is that the fan wiki is a part of it, but like, so when other parts of Hasbro, whether it be we're going to make an app, we're going to do this, we're going to do publishing, we're going to do these things, that's why Hasbro Studios was sort of built at the time to kind of work with that, because you had executives who were working on the show who could go talk to the story editors, to the people running the show, and be like, hey, Hasbro's looking to do X, Y, Z. It's like, oh, well, like, there's this, and like, they actually really did loop in the creative team a lot of the time, so that stuff felt more legit, and that, like, they did, and, like, it's not foolproof. There's as you guys are very often quick to point out, it doesn't always work, and some things do slip through the cracks, but for the most part, you really tried to make sure that everything was like keying off the show, and that everything did kind of stay in one lane for the most part. There's some things that didn't quite get there, but
But yeah, also DHX, having been on this show from the beginning, they were able to throw a flag on the play sometimes if something was wrong or not scanning. So you get a lot of eyes on it, which is helpful.
And we were actually talking about this last night, I believe at the Klingon bar. But we were actually talking about, like, one of the things that's cool about Pony and the way that it actually developed is that a lot of shows, you'll have like a creative team for like season 1 and season 2, and then there's like this big, somebody gets upset or something happens or somebody gets a new show, and then a new creative team comes in, and they don't have that level of experience, so they kind of are like doing their best, but they can't do it. And what's been interesting is whether it was Lauren moving on and Megan and Mitch and those people stepping up, or then Megan moving on and Nicole, Josh, everybody coming in, or like all of us that have sort of like woven in and out and in different roles, and same with Jason to Jim and everybody else up at DHX, there was never like a single moment where there wasn't somebody that was there that had been there for a while. So like there was this weird like baton passing that happened in almost like a way it wove it together that kind of allowed you to keep those story threads and keep those ideas and keep that part of the show that never fully went away, even if it changed and morphed over time.
Thank you.
Sorry for all the nitpicks.
We love you guys for it. You know what? I'd rather have a bunch of fans nitpicking everything than nobody watching the show. Yeah, right? So keep it up.
Thank you for the approval.
Howdy again, everybody. Just one more quick question for you. Who would you say, out of the Friendship School students, was the most fun for you to write for, and which of the students was the most difficult for you to write for?
Yona's so much fun to write.
Yona's the best. Yona's so much fun to
I
write.
writing for Smolder though too.
I was actually just saying this earlier because I bought some artwork on it, but like I wrote the episode where the young six all went into the caves underneath the school and met the Tree of Harmony and all that stuff happened. And actually Smolder was really, really hard to figure out what her fear was going to be. Like I couldn't, like I think I wrote, I don't even remember what I wrote originally, and I sent it to these guys, and like we went back and forth on some stuff, and I couldn't figure it out. And then when I figured out that she was secretly really kind of dug the froofy princessy stuff, but didn't want anybody to know, that was hard to get to. But then once I wrote it, and this happens a lot when you're writing, it's like you're like pounding your head against the wall, pounding your head, and then you do something, and you're like, yeah, that's just it. I did. Like I don't even feel like I came up with it. I feel like someone like put it in my head.
This is kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? About like you don't know what's going to happen, and then boom.
That last headbath worked.
Yeah. I don't know, Sandbar's hard to write for, I think, for me. And you're going to disagree, and that's fine.
Sandbar's my boy, man.
I know.
That's my boy.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, Yona's definitely my favorite to write for.
Yona.
I love that she's so guileless. She's so sincere about everything, and yet she's just so physical and so, I don't know, there's something about her.
Tank.
Yeah.
So I just need to jump in for one quick sec. We've got about 15 minutes left in the panel, and want to make sure we can answer as many questions as possible, so we're going to enter a semi-lightning round. So just going to go with the question as quick as we can. And Gary.
We'll do this for 15 minutes.
Please do.
No Emmys, no Emmys.
So season 9, show's coming to an end. What do you consider a successful ending of a show? Of an entire show, like the entire generation?
What do we consider as a successful ending of this show?
Yes.
You'll see.
The one we wrote.
Yeah, the one we did. You'll find out. We can't really tell you what we did, but I hope we did it. But I do think that like we all went into the finale knowing there was a lot of things that we wanted to wrap up, knowing that there was a lot of things that fans would want to see that we, so I hope we did it.
I mean, you'll tell us if it's successful or
I'm
not.
sure you'll let us know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll see. But I think that I feel pretty good about where everything ended up.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hi. So after season ends, did you receive any kind of feedback where you, from Hasbro or from someone, where you actually have to work in the story regarding that feedback?
Do we get feedback from like Hasbro or anybody?
Yeah.
No. We get feedback from the people in this room. No, it is true. I mean, look, it's one of the cool things about the modern era of like working on these shows is that like back in the day, either you wrote a show and you got like it either got good ratings or it didn't, and that's how you knew. And then there was like internet chat rooms where if you were a writer who was glutton for punishment, you would go read like long comment threads. And now all you guys just tell us directly on Twitter how good or bad we did, and we know immediately. So I think that once a show ends, a big company, whether it be Hasbro or Disney or anybody, like once the show's ended, like they don't really have a need to go tell the writers, hey, good job or bad job or whatever. But people like you who love the show and really care about the show, you do let us know. And like, look, as much as jokingly as I say it, like sometimes it hurts, sometimes it's stressful, but like I think it's awesome that there's this kind of relationship between fans and creators that never existed before. So I expect you to tweet us and let us know how we did.
Sure I will. Thank you.
Also, executives, the executive might be completely different from the time the episode was created till the time it airs, so they wouldn't really care anyway. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If they bring you on later, that's a good sign, right?
Yeah, if they hire you back on another show, then they probably think you did a good job.
Maybe.
Maybe. Everyone else said no.
Hi, so I was wondering if it's ever hard to balance like things written for the original target demographic of young girls versus, I guess, the Brony fandom, which is very much not that.
I think no, actually. To be honest, I have a whole theory on this, but like, who here likes Pixar movies? How many kids like Pixar movies? I think that there's this idea out there that like you have to do a different type of humor for young girls or for grown-ass adults who are all sitting in here right now. But like honestly, like there's a lot of things that are universal, and I think one of the reasons that My Little Pony has lasted so long and has done so good is that those friendship lessons are universal, and a lot of comedy is universal. And like, sure, like we were talking about before, like with My Little Pony, we have the ability to do really cool references and cameos and background ponies that little kids aren't gonna know, or there might be a reference to something, or a really clever joke, or a funny pun that is gonna go over a kid's head that you guys are gonna love. But then kids we all laugh at Pinkie Pie. Pinkie Pie starts crying or spitting in a helmet and, starts getting drowned in her own saliva. Who doesn't think that's funny? So I think that, even sitting in this room this morning and watching the 200th episode and watching everything that everybody of every age in this room was laughing at, I think that a lot of humor is universal, and I think that most executives and big companies and stuff that try and like tell you that there has to be a different type of humor and that a show for little girls needs to be different than a show for adults, I just think they're wrong.
Well said,
Now get down off my soapbox.
I have a quick question. Maybe you could advise somebody who would like to join a creative team as an entry-level person. A lot of these folks have lots of ideas for stories and what have you. So what would your advice to them be? How do they break in?
Okay, I think the first thing, if you want to be a professional writer, is just to write, finish things. A lot of people talk to me that say that they want to be a writer, but they haven't completed a script or don't have something to show me when I say, hey, I'd love to read your sample. So that's kind of just the first step. Read everything, watch everything, know why you love things. Another great exercise, I think, is to watch an episode and then outline what that episode was, like what beats happen in each act. And then once you have the beats, rewrite it yourself with different dialogue. So that'll help you, figure out how to make choices within it and kind of develop storytelling structure. And then once you have those things, once you've done all your due diligence and you're ready to start showing stuff, I would just reach out to whoever you know in the industry and offer to buy them coffee and pick their brain and talk to them about things. Because I think that it's a lot of times about the relationships you form before you have the job that gets you that opportunity. But part of that is being ready for that opportunity when it comes. I don't know if that's helpful. You guys want to chime in?
I mean, you have a whole thing about moving to LA and getting a job at Apple One temping or whatever.
Oh yeah, I got a whole strategy. Before I say that, which I'll say very quickly, the one thing I will say is a lot of times, and we did this too when we were younger. Like most of you guys have stories that you've written, you have scripts that you've already written. If you haven't, then Nicole's right. Finish a script, finish a story, finish whatever. But then rather than, and this is just the truth of it, running a show, getting to work on a show, part of it is being creative and part of it is having the experience of working in an industry and knowing people. So when you do get the opportunity don't give them your script thinking that that thing is going to get made. We all have versions of that we've written that maybe you're lucky enough to come back to later in life. But when you give someone that script, or if you write a spec of your favorite episode of your favorite series, give me feedback. What's good? What's not good? What do I need to work on? Because the feedback that you're going to get on what you can do to be better is going to be the most valuable thing. None of us write that script first. None of us had that thing where we handed something off and they were like, "Great, you're golden. Here you got the job."
Here's a rich and famous contract.
Here's a rich and famous contract.
It's a good skill to develop, right? Because you have to be ready to take those notes that you get. Because as writers, we get notes constantly, and we don't like it, but we have to do those notes, and we have to figure out good solutions for those to still tell the story we want to.
Yeah, and then what Josh was referencing, because I said this on a couple of panels. Like, look, the scary part of it is if you want to work in the animation industry or the entertainment industry at large, you got to move to LA at some point. Like, no one's going to give you that job working in an animation room when you're living in another state. So the scary part is moving to LA. And it's super scary because you don't know anybody, it's daunting, it's overwhelming. What I did when I moved out there is I found the first temp agency, at the time it was Apple One, and that's how I started paying my bills. But also because they were temping in the entertainment industry in the first year that I lived out there, I was temping at NBC, CBS, ABC, Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount. Like, I went to every lot every day, and I met people, and you go on lunch break, and you make friends, and you know other people there, and then eventually you get a job as an assistant. And the whole time, you're writing spec scripts, you're writing your own scripts, you're having coffee with people, you're getting feedback from them. So that's like not always necessarily the answer people want to hear, because that's a lot of really, really scary jumps you have to make.
Yeah.
But as they say in my favorite movie about male cheerleaders, Fired Up, sometimes you gotta risk it to get the biscuit.
How many movies about male cheerleaders?
There's just the one, but it's my favorite one.
So this is just a quick question. Did you expect Sunset to become like the breakout hit with the adult fans he was, or did you think the whole series, or maybe Sunset in particular, would just kind of be more for the kids?
Sunset Shimmer?
Yeah.
I knew from that leather jacket that she was just going to be like,
I'll tell you,
breakout, yeah.
I know because I was there. No, I think that when we did Equestria Girls, the first one, like, there was a lot of questions on whether that would even work.
Right.
There's a lot of questions early on whether it was even a good idea.
Right.
And Megan came up with such a great story for it, and Sunset Shimmer just got built as like a villain. Like, we needed a cool villain with a cool backstory, and Megan built that up. And at the end, she was sort of redeemed. But I think Sunset Shimmer was cool in Equestria Girls 1, but I think Sunset Shimmer became what Sunset Shimmer is now with the fan base in Equestria Girls 2.
Absolutely.
And I think that was and I will tell you this, because I don't think this is a wrong thing. I think Megan would say the same thing. The first draft of Equestria Girls 2, Rainbow Rocks, wasn't built around Sunset Shimmer's arc as much. The first draft was really trying to figure out a lot of what is this sequel, who are the sirens, whatever. Right. And one of the notes that we all kind of gave when we read the script was, hey, we're not really dealing with the fact that Sunset Shimmer is good now, but she was still kind of awful and turned the entire school into zombies. Like, she was just kind of there, and she was cool, but we kind of gave the note to Megan. We were like, why don't you go back and really focus a little bit more on Sunset? Like, let's at least reference the fact that this thing happened and how do people feel about it. And Megan went away, and we got this email from her at like 3 a.m. and she was like, I rewrote the whole movie.
Amazing.
Like, I rewrote the whole thing. Don't get mad at me. It's really about Sunset Shimmer. Just, I hope it's okay. Read it. And we read it, and we're like, this is amazing.
Exactly.
And I think that was what really solidified her, because it is between Equestria Girls 1 to 2 and even into 3, like, that is such a great arc. Exactly. And she just became this awesome character, so she's one of my favorites.
We've got about 5 minutes left in the panel, so I think we have enough time to get these 2 questions in, but again, we're going quick. I don't do quick.
Yeah, Mike.
Hello. I wanted to thank you so much for, this is going to sound weird, but for bringing back King Sombra, because there was so little done with him in the original first episode that he came in, but he has so much potential. For me as a writer, the story behind the bad guy and why he's bad is so important. But I know in fandom I've been kind of keeping an ear to it, and people were like, wow, that was really graphic how he was killed, and he caused a lot of misery before, and you see Pinkie Pie crying, and there was just so much drama in those first 2 episodes. Were you afraid that Hasbro was going to go, no, you can't go that far with it?
No, they tell us. They've had us pull back before when they think we've gone too far. I was surprised when I saw his death because it felt like they had pulled some frames from when we did the Mean Six episode and they melted. They're like, these images are too scary for kids. So when I saw what happened with Sombra, I'm like, wow, that one went through. So you never know.
It was like Raiders of the Lost Ark when Toad melted. It was
I
like,
was
oh my God.
shocked too. I remember seeing the memes of like sort of playing it in slow-mo and it was like, you know, for kids. And it was like,
yes,
whoa.
I was mostly shocked about how sexy he was in those 2 episodes. That voice! Ooh!
Big Jim,
baby, Big Jim!
I wasn't. I thought he was sexy from the beginning, but that's another story.
His vocabulary is so expansive now.
You're so bad, but you're so articulate.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. So, multi-season plot arcs, like with, school friendship, the pillars and whatnot. Were there any that you guys wanted to implement into the show, but kind of had to stop because of the limitation at season 9?
I don't think so. I mean, when we start getting into like the big moves like that, most of those start off so general and then sort of evolve along the way that there really isn't anything, that gets pulled out.
On 9, we actually knew the ending when we were at the beginning, which was helpful.
It's always helpful.
No, but I mean, like, we knew what the season finale would be and how to get there.
I do think, like I said, like we're all like geeks, so whenever you work on any project, you spend a lot of time thinking about like what you would do next. So I think the only thing that I will just live with for the rest of my life is that had the series gone on and had we been able to weave in different stuff, like I had a bunch of ideas on like what happened post Storm King and Tempest running around and having to come back to Equestria, and I was gonna loop in those 3 witches from that 1980s My Little Pony movie. I had some ideas, y'all.
Okay. Stay tuned for Michael Vogel's fanfic coming soon to an internet near you. Nice.
Sounds kind of inappropriate. So can we also stay tuned for Toasty Riders this evening? Will you all be on that panel?
Sure. We're going to get
All
started
right, so
right away.
So that's at 7 o'clock, if I remember right?
Yes.
I'll look forward.
That's where the truth all comes out.
Oh,
Yeah.
Who's coming to Toasty Riders tonight?
Sweet. Excellent. But in the here and now, I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their time, their insights, and their talents with this fandom. We've so enjoyed what you've created, and we look forward to further creations, both in My Little Pony and beyond. And I want to thank all of you for coming and asking questions and just having a fun time with us. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of BABSCon 2019.
Yeah! Thank you.
I want to thank you for mentioning Transformers the movie. I'm scarred again.
You got the touch!